Hey everyone, my name's Hexadecimal, a multi-season challenger player, and today I'll be breaking down jungle pathing in 5 levels of difficulty. So let's get right into it and start with level 1. The first thing every player should learn about jungle pathing is that you want to start your path on the opposite side of the map that you want to influence. For example, if we start at our blue buff on the top side of the map, we'll naturally clear camps towards the bottom side. So choosing your buff location is really about identifying which lane, top lane or bot lane, that you want to pressure early on, and then starting on the opposite side so you can path towards them. Now that may sound very simple, but it immediately poses our first question. How do you identify which lane, top lane or bot lane, is the one that you want to path towards? And surprise, that's what level 1 is about, identifying what's called gank potential in your lanes. Now, gank potential is actually really easy to identify every game. You just want to break it down into 3 simple things to look out for in your lane matchups: crowd control, mobility, and escapability. Let's hop into a challenger game to demonstrate this system in action. Here we have a Talon jungle. In top lane, his teammate is Akali, and in bot lane, his teammates are Alistar and Yasuo. Now remember, when evaluating gank potential, the first thing you want to look for is the crowd control your teammates bring. The reason for this is teammates with crowd control makes ganks far more likely to succeed since they can set up the gank for you. So I want you to tell me, out of these 2 lanes, top and bot, who has more crowd control? Well, clearly bot lane. Alistar has a knockup, knockback, and stun, and Yasuo has his 3rd tornado knockup. Compare that to Akali, who only has a slow on her Q. Great, so bot lane wins this one. Next, let's move on to mobility. Teammates with mobility mean it's easier for them to follow up on your engage, again, increasing the chances of a successful gank. So between these top and bot lane matchups, who has more mobility? It's fairly even. Akali has a ton of mobility in her kit with her E and W and ultimate. But so does Alistar with his W and Yasuo with his E dash. Yasuo can easily ult anyone Alistar knocks up, so let's call it a draw. Lastly, we then look at the enemy's escapability. This means how easy is it for them to escape your gank? Naturally, enemies with the least amount of escapability give an increased chance of our ganks to succeed. In top lane, Akali is facing an enemy gangplank, and in bot lane, Alistar and Yasuo are facing Ezreal and Galio. Out of these 2 lanes, who has the least amount of escapability in their kits? You may have been tempted to say Gangplank, after all he doesn't have a dash or blink. But what he does have is the ability to cleanse crowd control, and his passive means if he auto attacks or explodes one of his barrels, he gets a big boost of movement speed. In bot lane, obviously Ezreal is very slippery with his blink, but Galio only has a dash which can be body blocked. Notice how this tells us if we do gank bot, we should likely focus the Galio, not the Ezreal, since he'll be far easier to gank. Overall, escapability is also pretty even, and so is a draw as well. So by following this simple 3-step process, we see bot lane is the one with the most gank potential. And we now know to start on the opposite side of the map as them, topside at our red buff, so we can then path towards the lane with the most gank potential. And what do you know? We arrive bot, and the crowd control along with the mobility of our bot lane sets up the gank on the low escapability Galio. Alright, so level 1 was starting on the opposite side of the lane you want to influence, and choosing that lane based on gank potential. Level 2 builds on this concept, and it introduces another layer, minion waves. Before we get into level 2 though, if you truly want to get better at League of Legends, you need to check out skillcap.com. We are the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We've been able to offer this for years to hundreds of thousands of players because our service really does work. Learn more at the end of this guide or click the link in the description below. Now, back to the video. Minion waves are quite important at dictating the success of a gank. For example, in the previous replay, notice how it was Ezreal and Galio pushing up. That made the gank possible. If the wave was frozen in front of their tower, it wouldn't matter how much crowd control or mobility Yasuo and Alistar had, the gank wouldn't be there. So clearly, predicting who will have the push advantage is also important, but how exactly do we predict that as a jungler? Well, there are 2 main things to look out for. First is any matchups that have a ranged advantage against a melee champion. This is the easiest to predict as 99% of the time, the ranged champion will get the push lead since they can use their auto attacks to both freely harass the melee champion if they try to move up to the wave, zoning them, while they also get to freely auto attack the wave themselves, generating a push lead. Keep in mind though, you also want to think of melee champions who have ranged harass abilities as ranged champions. A good example of this is a lot of Gangplank matchups where he essentially acts as a ranged champion with his Q harass. The second thing to look out for is who has more wave clear in their kits. Mainly look out for AoE abilities that can hit multiple minions on a relatively low cooldown. For example, let's take a bot lane matchup like Xayah Soraka against Jhin Janna. At first, this may seem very complicated, but start by only comparing one role to each other. So starting with the supports. Soraka just has more wave clear than Janna, since Soraka's starting wave clear ability Q has a lower cooldown of 8 seconds to Janna's Q, which has a cooldown of 12 seconds. Then compare the AD carries, Xayah and Jhin. Again, at level 1, not only does Xayah have her Q, an AoE ability itself, but it then activates her passive, letting her auto attacks hit nearly the entire wave, giving her even more wave clear. Compare this to Jhin, who does have a low cooldown wave clear ability, his Q, but he can only auto attack 4 times before reloading. And so you can see how Xayah just slightly edges him out in push potential. So Xayah and Soraka should get the early push lead, leading into level 2 first, giving them even more control over the wave with a level advantage, then leading to even more pushing. So these two matchups we just saw are actually from a challenger game. Let's rewind back to the start and look at things from Karthus' point of view as we decide which lane to path towards. Now, remember what we taught you in the level 1 segment. We want to first identify gank potential, crowd control, mobility, and escapability. In this case, we look at our matchup topside. We have Gangplank against an enemy Fiora. Our Gangplank has weak crowd control, only offering his barrel slow, and low mobility with his movement speed boost. And Fiora has great escapability with her Q dash and W that blocks crowd control. So in short, top lane has low gank potential. Now compare this to our bot lane. Our Jhin and Janna both have a ton of crowd control in their kits. And sure, they lack mobility, but the enemy also lacks escapability, and so that cancels each other out. So clearly, our bot lane has the higher gank potential. And if you only follow level 1, then you would know to start topside at a red and path towards bot, the lane with the most gank potential. However, now that we're in level 2, we know we should take it a step further and to factor in who will get the push lead. Based on our previous analysis, we know Gangplank is ranged against melee, so we'll get the push lead there, making Fiora even more difficult to gank at the safety of her tower. As for bot lane, it's the enemy bot lane Xayah and Soraka that will get the push lead, making them even easier to gank. And I want to highlight something very important here. Notice how at right around the 2-minute and 45-second mark, our Jhin and Janna finally hit level 2 themselves, while the enemy bot is pushed up and clearly gankable. So why do I mention the 2-minute and 45-second timing? Well, that's typically the fastest route you can take to gank a lane early on, which is what we saw Talon do in our level 1 section. He hits bot lane right at 2:45. However, even if you didn't hit that window and took a slower opening route, notice how the wave is nicely frozen in front of our tower, leaving an extremely free gank on bot lane anyways. And so, to summarize, with our level 1 analysis, we know top has weak gank potential while bot lane has high gank potential. And with our level 2 analysis, we know our top is pushing, making it even harder to gank, while the enemy bot will be pushing, making them easier to gank. Seems pretty straightforward. Everything is telling us that we should start at our red and path towards bot lane. Well, this is why there's 5 levels we'll be going over, because surprise, surprise, our challenger Karthus decides to start at his blue, pathing towards top instead. Why in the world would he do this? Well, here's the thing. Following the first 2 levels of pathing you just learned will get you free ganks with easy kills just like this in a ton of your games. But as you get higher in rank, there's one more layer you have to add on. And it involves thinking of the following question. Let's say we did in fact decide to start at our red topside and path towards this bot lane matchup of Xayah and Soraka. Well, there's another jungler in the game, right? What happens if once we get there, the enemy jungler Vi shows up to counter gank? Would that still be a free gank for us? Of course not. The bot lane will have a minion wave to fight inside while kiting back and springing the counter gank. We should lose that 3v3. Just as bad is if we avoid executing the gank once we're on the bottom side of the map. Well, taking the scuttle is out of the question, as with the push lead the enemy bot lane has, they can collapse with the enemy jungler to secure that scuttle, or even invade us. And so now you should begin to understand the importance of level 3, factoring in the enemy jungler. You see, in our previous section, we identified how in top lane, our Gangplank would have the push lead. At the same time, the enemy bot lane would have the push lead there. And just as the enemy bot lane pushing makes them easier to gank, so does Gangplank pushing make him easier to gank for the enemy jungler. And it's this realization that should make things a lot more clear. If the enemy Vi paths to our bot lane, well, their bot lane will be pushing, and ours will be at the safety of their tower. Vi won't get anything. And if we path towards our Gangplank, the same thing happens. He'll be pushing, the enemy will be safe at their tower, so we won't get anything either. Now, you're probably thinking, well, what do I even do with that information? It sounds like both choices suck for both junglers. Well, there's an easy trick to solving this problem. You need to identify who would win the skirmish if both junglers path to the same lane. And it's actually pretty simple to do this, as assuming the jungle matchup is relatively even, the lane that is pushing gives you the advantages needed to win the skirmish like 90% of the time. And this is because laners who get a push lead, well, they cement level leads and apply early damage and generate health advantages, all while having a bigger wave to fight inside if they do get ganked. This also gives them lane priority, being able to respond to fights first near the river since the enemy will be pinned down to their tower by the minion wave. Basically, there are 4 scenarios you need to be aware of in every game. First, both junglers path bot side. In this game, we know Karthus would lose that skirmish and scuttle. The second and third occur if junglers path opposite sides away from each other. For example, if Karthus goes top and Vi goes bot, they should go even given they shouldn't have ganks available except for potential tower dives and scuttles for themselves. The fourth, though, is when both junglers path top side, and we know in this game Karthus would win that skirmish and scuttle due to Gangplank's push lead. And it's by using level 3 analysis, it becomes clear pathing topside results in either a neutral or positive outcome, while pathing bot side would result in either a neutral or negative outcome. It just so happens that in this game, Vi made the wrong decision, only using level 1 and level 2 pathing. They tunnel visioned too much on the gank potential of Gangplank, and this made it easy for Karthus to counter that and crush him in the early game. Now, being equipped with these first 3 levels of pathing is kind of like the core fundamentals, the main theory behind pathing. Level 4 is all about applying that theory to real game scenarios, because just like Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face. And although the only fists thrown in League are at your monitor, it still holds true to pathing. That's why level 4 is all about adaptation. The best way to demonstrate this is to hop into our Smurf commentaries on our website, where Challenger experts walk you through how to carry in every elo. In this game, we have our Challenger Jungler Japanese import. He followed our first 3 levels of analysis you just learned to correctly identify he should be starting on the top side of the map, pathing towards bot side. He then checks the side lanes to see who arrives first. Garen shows first, indicating the enemy jungler is getting a leash bot side, meaning they're pathing top, the opposite side of them. It's now that he needs to implement level 4, adaptation. As he moves towards the bot side of the map, he's going to be analyzing that bot lane to see if he should take a faster or slower path to that side of the map. Let's have him explain why in real time.
They actually are fighting for push, so I'm going to skip camps here and go Gromp.
Essentially, as he finishes Raptors, he has to decide whether to take a slower path, like doing Wolves, Blue, and Gromp, or take a much faster path towards bottom, which would be skipping Wolves and Blue and heading straight to Gromp instead. When he moved his camera, he saw that both laners were fighting over the push lead, indicating not only that the wave is in the middle of the lane, likely leaving the enemy bot gankable in the future, but also that trades are likely going to happen as both sides try to cement a push lead. Compare this to if he looked bot side and saw his bot lane was pushing. Well, then there's no rush to get bot side as no gank would be available, and we know the enemy jungler is pathing top side, so can't gank our bot lane that's pushed up. That would lead to him doing a more optimal path of farming, Wolves, Blue, and Gromp. It's this real-time adaptation to your path that leads to you getting free kills just like this. Here's another example of adaptation with our Challenger Expert skill shot on Kha'Zix. Again, uses the first 3 levels to identify to start blue and path towards his bot side. As he starts at his blue, he sees the enemy Riven show top first, indicating the enemy jungler is getting a leash bot side, pathing towards top, the opposite side of him. You can see as early as him fighting Gromp, he's actively using his camera to check his nearby lanes. So first, he spots that his mid lane matchup is heavily trading and getting low in health. Let's hear his thoughts on this in real time.
Mid's jumping in, they're trading quite a lot, so I could look for the hot 3 mid gank.
Notice though that right after this, he quickly checks his other 2 lanes. Even though he sees a potential gank opportunity on the low health mid, he double checks his side lanes to make sure there isn't a better opportunity there. He then continues to check the state of mid lane so that he's updated on it as he finishes clearing the wolf camp. The main idea here is that if mid lane continues to play aggressive and stay low on health, he could hit level 3 off wolves, then take this path around to execute a transition gank on mid to the bottom side of the map. Let's hear why he decided not to do this.
And he seems to be playing a little bit more safe, what he is showing here.
So it's specifically at this moment, as he's finishing wolves, that he checks mid and sees Sylas playing extremely far back and safe. This is when he chooses to just path as normal bot side. That being said, he doesn't stop this constant checking, looking for potential adaptations in his path once he gets to his Raptors. By being active with this camera, he spots Sylas is back to pushing and playing aggressive, and so is able to execute an easy gank mid after and get his flash. And for one final example, let's look at our Challenger Expert BMX specs on Mordekaiser. Again, he's done the 3 levels of analysis and chooses to path bot side. He does red, Krugs, and Raptors. Now, as he finishes Raptors, let's listen into what he's thinking about.
Echo, probably red side, do a red side clear into a mid gank that I can counter over here for a bit. I don't really see any way Swain dies with his positioning currently, so.
In the previous examples, we saw how by checking lanes, it led us to ganking pushed up enemies. But you want to use this same method to predict what lanes of yours are gankable to allow you to protect them. Knowing that Echo could be ganking his pushed up mid at this time, BMX makes a very slight detour to hover mid for the counter gank on that timing. He then decides, given how Zed is playing far back and safe, and Swain is full health, and has a level advantage, that he doesn't need to hover anymore. Do keep in mind though, if he suddenly saw Echo come from Fog of War in the minimap, well, he will just immediately peel off wolves to still counter gank. So you should now understand how even though the first 3 levels provides you with a theoretical best path, that you absolutely need level 4 to then begin adapting in real time to unforeseen changes. Now, for all 4 levels so far, notice how we've only focused on one type of jungling, horizontal pathing, where you move from left to right or right to left. Level 5 is all about unlocking that next dimension, vertical pathing. Understanding vertical pathing, at least at its core, is actually pretty simple. First, you need to understand that vertical pathing becomes an option only when the enemy starts on the opposite side of you. For example, let's say you start at your red, and the enemy starts at their red. Well, both junglers now have an option of pathing vertically, where they invade the enemy's jungle. Compare that to if you started on the same side. It's not possible to vertically path since the enemy will have already cleared 2 out of the 3 camps before you even arrive, and you'll have to fight over that third. Given the amount of time you'll waste walking from your side of the map to theirs, then having to walk back after, it's simply not worth it for only 1 camp at best. Okay, so with that core concept in your mind, we can vertically path when the enemy jungler starts on the opposite side. Let's show you some examples of how to use this to your advantage. The first comes from our skill cap challenger expert skill shot on Graves. He's starting at his red. The enemy bot lane shows first, indicating the enemy Fiddlesticks is also starting at red on the opposite side of the map. So this gives us the option of pathing vertically and invading the enemy's blue side jungle. Now, I know you're wondering, in what situations should you actually do this? Well, first, it's important that you know you'll have nearby lane priority, meaning your lanes will be the ones pushing so they can pin down the enemies and easily respond if a fight breaks out in the jungle. In this case, Ahri is against Qiyana mid. I want you to tell me, how do we know our Ahri will have lane priority? It's because it's a ranged versus melee matchup. Remember from earlier, ranged champions 99% of the time will get the push lead since they can zone the melees off the wave with their auto attacks while damaging minions. And when we take a look at our bot lane, we see it's Aphelios Thresh against Ezreal and Poppy. Guess what? I'll teach you a little trick. Since AD carries are typically always ranged, just look at the support matchup. Thresh is ranged against a melee Poppy, so we know we'll have the push lead as well, and thus lane priority bot lane. The second thing you need to do before vertical pathing is that you want to make sure you're playing a strong early game jungler, since often the enemy will run into you during their horizontal path. In this case, Graves is definitely stronger early game than Fiddlesticks. Now, most players make the super common mistake of thinking that once they kill their red, they need immediately to go and steal the enemy's blue. This is usually wrong for 3 main reasons. The first has to do with the timing of it. If you immediately invade, well, the nearby enemy laners can immediately react. You haven't given your teammates enough time to get that push lead to have lane priority. The second reason is that it will take you a long time to hit level 3, since you have to kill your own buff, the enemy's buff, and then their Gromp in this instance. The buff camps are the hardest to kill due to their high health, and so you can end up getting caught out while still level 2. The third and final reason is ward timings. Enemy teams often place a ward on their second buff to watch for invades. If you delay your invade, you increase the chance of that ward expiring while also giving the enemy a false sense of security and committing to a slower route, thinking an invade isn't happening even if it is warded. You can see this in action. By Graves taking red and then Raptors after, he now has enough XP to hit level 3 when he steals the enemy Gromp. This actually gave him a level advantage over Fiddlesticks, who got hard punished, going for a 4 camp where he does red, Raptors, Wolves into blue and Gromp. Keep in mind, even if they're the same level, Graves is the stronger early game jungler, while he has lane priority in both his nearby lanes and the element of surprise. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what was Fiddlesticks supposed to do? Well, if you can't defend against the invade, the answer is to do an invade yourself. Split the map in half vertically, which is called vertical jungling. Let's hop into another replay from Skillshot to demonstrate this concept in action. The game starts out with the enemy Lilia invading his blue buff. Since he can't defend against this invade, he knows to head to the enemy's blue buff to equalize the position. Now, what's very important to take note of here is how he doesn't just take the blue buff and leave, he takes the Gromp and Wolves too. This is because the enemy jungler can't actually prevent you from doing this. This is because the blue quadrant is actually quite fast to kill. On top of this, the junglers are on opposite sides of the map, they simply can't get back to defend in time. If you don't steal their entire blue side jungle in this position, well, you risk them stealing yours, and then you fall behind in camps. So, after Karthus steals the enemy's blue side quadrant, he full clears his red side quadrant. Keep in mind, this is identical to if he had just started at his own blue buff and full cleared in a horizontal fashion. However, the enemy Lilia actually didn't know the importance of full clearing the enemy's quadrant in these vertical jungling positions, which allows Karthus to get a 2-camp farm lead. This then results in him being level 4, while Lilia is still level 3, giving him a free solo kill on the enemy jungler. Now, there's also one really common scenario that you can use vertical pathing to completely dominate with. Here we have our skill cap challenger expert Japanese import on Jarvan. He starts at his blue, and by watching these side lanes, we see the enemy Nasus appears first, indicating the enemy Nocturne is starting at his red. Now, hold on, I thought we couldn't do vertical pathing if we start on the same side of the map as the enemy jungler. Well, check this out. Jarvan does blue, Gromp into wolves, and heads to his top side. He decides to skip raptors and head straight to his red buff. Let's have Japanese import explain why he did this in real time.
Red is definitely good, skipping raptors, just being topside. I probably can't gank this or dive it, looks like, but I need to at least mess with Nocturne to make sure he doesn't get ganked. Unfortunately, he took tower shots, so it looks like he's actually losing now.
So his intention is to protect his top laner that's pushing. You need to remember Nocturne started at his red and so should be pathing horizontally, ending topside. However, Nocturne then shows botside ganking. This is such a huge mistake that a lot of players make. When you start on the same side of the map as the enemy jungler, you never want to gank the side lane of where you started. And you're about to learn why. Jarvan is able to eat up all this delicious free gold and XP, stealing all of Nocturne's topside camps. Meanwhile, Nocturne can't equalize the position. The botside camps that he would normally invade, well, they're already dead. And again, a common pattern I'm sure you're picking up on, this additional experience causes a level lead, and so Jarvan then easily wins the ensuing 1v1, being level 4 to level 3. Now, all the scenarios we just went over were either reacting to the enemy or doing a delayed invade. Here's the thing, you can literally skip all of this. Here's a game of Japanese import playing Diana into Warwick. Importantly, he actually spots Warwick botside early on. This tells him he's likely starting blue. Here's the thing, if Diana starts at her blue and then invades, that is a terrible idea. It will take a lot of time to walk there, letting Warwick potentially contest, and Warwick will crush Diana in the early game. At the same time as nearby matchups, well, they should lose that early push, and so we won't have lane priority. When you're in this spot, you can literally just start at the enemy's raptors, then take the red after, and then head back into your own jungle. The reason this works is that by starting in the enemy's jungle and then leaving before taking Krugs, which is a very slow camp to kill, you get back to the safety of your own jungle prior to them transitioning to that side of the map. You can see this happen at this moment. Warwick crosses over and discovers his raptors are gone, then checks his red to find they're gone as well. Notice how it's now too late for Warwick to invade our blue side jungle, as we've already killed everything but wolves, which will be dead by the time he arrives. At the same time, it is very difficult for him to make a huge time investment of crossing the entire map and trying to invade our red side quadrant to equalize. We would have the red buff advantage and can play defensive waiting for our laners to respond. Worst case, he'd have to steal both our raptors and red to just go even, which is quite unrealistic. Same as the other vertical pathing routes, it results in an experience lead, which then creates a level advantage, and that helps win another skirmish shortly after. There's also another strong variation to this route. Again, we see Japanese import using it when the enemy Lee Sin starts at blue. He starts at the enemy's raptors, stealing them, and then the red buff after. In this variation though, he spots a gank topside, and so chooses to go for the free kill instead of going back into his own jungle to farm. Keep in mind, because he revealed himself on the map, it means Lee Sin now knows his topside is gone and should invade Japanese import's botside jungle to equalize. But with the kill topside, we can simply recall and spend that kill gold for an item advantage. Now we show up at our red, Lee Sin's abilities on cooldown from trying to take it, and result in an easily 1v1 with our item lead. Now, don't get me wrong, there are even more variations than what we've covered, but I want you to take one core lesson from level 5 vertical pathing. It's that by using this more niche, advanced pathing, you put the opponent in very uncomfortable positions they aren't used to being in. This results in them making a ton of mistakes as they try to figure out what the correct choice is in real time. It also results in a lot of inefficient pathing as they hesitate and don't exactly know where to go. Meanwhile, since you're the one who's consciously choosing to execute vertical pathing, you can plan out exactly what you're going to do well in advance. Additionally, as you do this vertical pathing in more games, you get more experience, and so it becomes not only far easier to make the correct decisions and responses, but you can also make those correct decisions much faster. Essentially, vertical pathing can allow you to drag the opposing jungler into unfamiliar waters, where they end up as nothing more than shark bait. And there you have it. You have successfully survived jungle pathing explained in 5 levels of difficulty. We'd greatly appreciate it if you'd leave a comment below telling us which level you found the most helpful. And before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little bit more about skillcap.com. So we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Well, not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium League of Legends guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week with over 2,000 guides curated into over 270 courses. No one can compare. We've also sent challenger players to show you how to escape the ranks you're stuck in over 1,100 times and counting, where they then commentate how to carry live. They also respond to any question that you have. So sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month to improve fast and get the rank you've always wanted. Link in the description below. We here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.